this is Professor Noctis. I am doing my first video ever right now, and thanks for watching. Today I'm going to be looking at Final Fantasy XVI, the trailer that released just about a year ago with the release of the PlayStation 5, because we have a PlayStation Showcase tomorrow, and we've got TGS in a few weeks, and maybe Final Fantasy 16 is going to show up, but I figured that it'd be a good time to maybe do a deep dive theory video for Final Fantasy 16 based on the trailer we've got. There's a lot of theory videos out there, but my background is that I have spent a lot of time in the religious world, religion major in college, did grad work, and ultimately did my dissertation on Judeo-Christian kingship and Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 15, the two of those together. In fact, I teach a college course on that stuff. So anyway, using some of that religious expertise, thought that I might do a theory video. So we're going to watch portions of the Final Fantasy 16 trailer from way back when last year and see what we can figure out from it. So let's go ahead and take a look together. Yep. Campfire imagery like 15.
You all know the target. Shiva's dominant. And only the dominant.
How do we even know the girl will be a monk?
Our kind do not question orders, we follow them.
Sergeant, let's summon their icon.
Yeah, this part's huge. Right here.
That thing's a bloody mountain.
Yeah, so this opening scene here is so interesting because it really builds in the lore of what Final Fantasy 16 is going to be, and so much of that lore comes from a lot of history and theological warfare from pretty much the days of the Hebrew Bible and the kind of pre-Christian scriptures for our Judeo-Christian friends. I think this is so interesting because in the Old Testament or Hebrew scripture books of Joshua, Judges, First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, they're living in an era where there are wars where not just the nations and the cities are at war, but the gods that represent those cities are also at war. And so, for instance, for the people of Israel, they are hearkening to Yahweh, who is their warrior patron god. And whenever they go out into battle, they have this sense that God is going with us. That's why when you read the Psalms, it says that, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is mighty in battle, that sort of thing. And so in this game, there appears to be warfare where nations and armies are beholden to their warrior patron god. Now, they call them icons. Now, what's also interesting here is that they use the word dominant. And the word dominant it refers to a person who is intrinsically linked to these icons. Or, to put it another way, these persons are essentially prophets that serve as go-betweens of the humans and the divine and the supernatural. I think that's super, super interesting. So one of the theories that we can kind of have here is that we are going to be seeing some theological warfare, some divine inspiration in these battles, which isn't totally unfamiliar for Final Fantasy territory. We get this a lot, especially in 15 when you talk about the astral gods and that sort of thing. But this is a really interesting piece because of that idea of the dominant being linked to the icon. Okay, so that's a brief starter for us. Let's keep going with the trailer.
Our foe will not relinquish their mother crystal easily. This will be a bitter fight.
You should not be out of doors. We have discussed this. Come, Joshua. Your father will be expecting us.
I am John.
Yeah, so I love this part particularly because this kid, his name is apparently Joshua, and if you go to the Final Fantasy XVI website, you can read more about him. But just from the trailer, we get that his name is Joshua. Joshua, very important character in the Old Testament Hebrew scripture mythos, even the book Joshua. Joshua, to give a little bit of insight in the Old Testament paradigm, Joshua is essentially the crusader who is the leader of the people of Israel as they are taking their, quote, promised land. So they were a nomadic people for the first 5 books of the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures. And then Joshua is tasked with being this warrior who's going, a war general who's going to lead the people to take the land in the surrounding areas. So there's lots of fighting. They fight against the Philistines, the Canaanites. There's a bunch of different nations or cities that the people of Israel fight against. I think it's really interesting that they call this kid Joshua, and Joshua is apparently the dominant. Joshua is the go-between between their patron icon and the people. I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with that, and I think we get some hints here in the trailer. Let's keep going.
Joshua's shield. I'm sworn to protect him.
Some good battle gameplay here.
What do you mean you refuse? Did you not pledge your sword to our cause?
What does it matter? It was the Dalmex who drove back the Crusaders in the Battle of the Twin Realms, was it not?
Without the blessing of the Mother Crystal, we cannot defend our realm from the spread of the Blight.
Okay, that's another really interesting piece there, simply because they speak of kind of this multi-nation war going on, and this particular woman clad in black, she is kind of acting like a mercenary, almost like an Aranea Highwind type from Final Fantasy XV, but she's also a representative, perhaps, from this other nation. They're facing a really interesting dilemma that we don't know anything about. They just refer to it as the Blight. And apart from the, quote, Mother Crystal, they have no defense against this Blight. Now, that's pretty interesting because the Mother Crystal seems to indicate that there is some kind of sacred relic or sacred, item that each nation is going to have. Now, this is very similar to the crystals in previous games, where the crystals impart or imbue certain powers on our heroes. Final Fantasy XV had a huge focus on the crystal in Insomnia, and then the Niflheim Empire took that from Insomnia, and all hell broke loose basically for them in the Empire, which you find out in Chapter 13 of that game. Crystals oftentimes have this sort of thing. In 16, it seems like the mother crystals are going to be these divine items. Now, I mention this because in the Hebrew scriptures, there are divine and sacred items that serve as these relics that create connection to the divine. So in the Hebrew scriptures and the Israelite histories, you've got the Ark of the Covenant, made famous not just from the Bible, but the Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Ark of the Covenant is essentially this giant chest that the people of the Israelite army would carry out into battle. And this was signifying of the throne of God, the presence of God that would go with them. I love this particular scene in 16 because this sacred relic, the Mother Crystal, is going to protect them from the Blight. Now, in 1 Samuel chapters 4 and 5, the Philistines steal the Ark of the Covenant from the Israelites. And as soon as they take it, the people of Israel feel vulnerable. They feel like they are susceptible to defeat, and they are. But when the Ark of the Covenant goes into the Philistine camp, plagues break loose. They have plagues where tumors and boils appear all over their body, likely spread by mice. Think bubonic plague and sort of thing. So what happens, they end up sending it back. After one particular event where they placed the Ark of the Covenant in their own temple, a temple dedicated to the god Dagon, they wake up one morning, the god Dagon is fallen on his face in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and they're thinking to themselves, gosh, the God of the Israelites is just like super powerful, more powerful than our God, and also their God is afflicting us with all this plague stuff, so we got to send it back. So they ended up sending it back to the Israelites. And this is just, again, indicative of the culture of religious relics and how they symbolize the presence of their patron deity, their patron God, who is going to fight for them. This is not unique to Israel. Israel served Yahweh or Elohim, another word that could be used for their God. But there are other gods out there as well. There's gods like Baal, there's gods like Molech and Asherah, and you get these religious relics that coincide to them. So anyway, I share that simply because there's some interesting iconography going on that seems to channel the divine power, and we're going to see perhaps these nations fighting over possession of the, quote, mother crystals. Okay, let's keep going. Dragoon action, love that. Now that was such a really cool scene. Let's flip back just a little bit. You see the main character Clive rush in with a feathery arm here. And so we'll find out later in this trailer that the patron deity or the icon of this particular nation is the phoenix. I think this is a really cool gameplay element because Clive here is utilizing the power of the phoenix, is what it looks like. Power of the phoenix to actually play into his fighting style. I think that's super, super cool. So if we actually see heroes in this game invoke the power of the deities within gameplay, I think that's super, super cool. And also gives a lot of really cool religious lore as far as channeling the power of the deity and what happens when you have the blessing, what happens when you lose the blessing. There's some really cool story things that could go on there.
Dragoons. Imperial vipers. Do they really mean to invade us?
Classic enemies here in Final Fantasy games. And we have blood. We have blood on Joshua here, which is, I mean, if you read the book of Joshua in the Hebrew Scriptures, there's a lot of blood being shed there. But this is really interesting for a Final Fantasy game. I don't remember there being this much blood in a Final Fantasy game up to this point, at least not as graphic in nature. But this next scene is so interesting because I think that it points at a larger story at play. Let's go.
It's the Archduke's son.
Phoenix.
Okay, and then we get the Phoenix coming in. Let's talk for a second about this Phoenix here. The Phoenix, is represented in a lot of different mythologies, but since my kind of focus is on Jewish and Christian histories and theologies, I want to talk about what it means to the Christian circles. So obviously the Christian circles adapted the symbolism of the phoenix from other religious traditions and other mythologies for their own purposes in the first few centuries. The phoenix in early church sort of lingo, as they did with a lot of things in the world around them, they co-opted it so that it was representative of their Christian faith. So why would the phoenix be representative of the Christian faith? Well, that's easy, because their Messiah, Jesus, resurrected, and the phoenix traditionally symbolizing rebirth or resurrection even, usually through fires and flames. This was such a poignant image for the early church of Jesus rising from the dead, rising from the ashes of death, so to speak, that the phoenix became synonymous for a lot of circles. Now, it didn't hold the same resonance as, say, what would be the cross or the empty cross, especially for Protestants eventually, but the phoenix was terribly important to the early church as far as telling their story. Now, here's what I love about this particular scene. We have the phoenix, and we have Joshua as the phoenix's dominant. And so one of the things that's really happening here is they're setting up Joshua as this this person who is dead set, or the integral link of divine connection and human connection. He's represented by the phoenix. Also here, he's absolutely covered in blood. One other interesting item is that the name Joshua can also later in history be translated Yeshua, which is a variant or a similarity to Jesus. That's why in a lot of movies and in a lot of things you hear Jesus being referred to as Yeshua in the live depictions of New Testament stories and stuff. So, what does that mean for this story? Well, we see with Joshua covered in absolute blood. I don't know why I laugh when I say that, but when he's covered in blood, there is something tragic that is going to happen. If I were a betting man, I would probably say that Joshua is going to die, and your character, Clive, is going to step up, have to avenge this. But because his name is Joshua, because he is accompanied by this phoenix, I would be remiss if I didn't just speculate that Joshua is going to die and resurrect like Yeshua, like Jesus in Christian mythology. I think it's super, super interesting. Not sure how they're going to do it, but I'd take that one to the bank. Let's keep watching.
That's impossible.
And here we see Ifrit, a second icon of fire.
The legacy of the crystals.
And so there seems to be this battle between Phoenix and Ifrit. I would dare say that this is probably the moment that Phoenix and maybe even Joshua go down. They die because, as we'll see in a moment, Clive, there's a time skip, and Clive is embarking on a journey to end all of this stuff.
Has shaped our history.
I mean, look at the blood that's just kind of coming up from what Ifrit is doing here. I mean, that is stunning for a Final Fantasy game.
I'll kill you. If it's the last thing.
I think that this time skip is super, super interesting. What Clive is saying here, I'll kill you if it's the last thing I do. This is a story of revenge, I think. It's one where the ways of doing war and battle by these patron gods in the past is just not working anymore. And so Clive, perhaps after he loses Joshua, he's unable to defend Joshua because he's his shield. He is embarking on this. How it all plays out is going to be super, super interesting, but he is dead set on ending the reign or the legacy of these crystals and these patron gods and all this stuff.
I do.
So we get the title screen with what kind of looks like a behemoth, but I think it's probably supposed to be Ifrit fighting the Phoenix. So all this to say, I mean, there's a lot of really, really interesting stuff in this trailer. But for me, I think that the big thing is that we're looking at a game that's going to be dealing deeply with some religious war imagery, and then we're also looking at a game that's going to be dealing with what happens when that religious patron god sort of relationship begins to fail and falter, and how do you overcome that? I think that we're going to see a really interesting thing with that time skip that symbolizes how the Jewish people and even the Christian people move beyond that sort of patron warrior god into a new relationship with the divine. I think Joshua's going to die. I think that Joshua is going to resurrect. The Phoenix piece there, I think that is pretty on the nose, maybe too easy to think through. But those are some of my predictions. I wonder what your predictions are, especially as these are probably going to be debunked by the next trailer that's either released tomorrow in the showcase or in the next month at TGS. Regardless, hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, make sure that you like and follow me on here, on YouTube, and on the socials and all that kind of stuff. But until next time, until we have another trailer, keep watching, keep playing. Walk tall, my friends. Take it easy.